All right, let's go ahead and fork off of this last Flexbox 2 pin where we set up alternating colors. So I'll fork and I'm going to edit this and I'm going to call it Flexbox 3. And let's go ahead now and let's just call this basic rows and columns. All right, so let's just save that. So what I'd like to do is really quickly just take a look at something in the HTML. So if you look at line 5 of the HTML, you'll notice that this section has a class of column. Well, in the CSS, you won't find any classes called column yet, so I haven't created anything there. This was kind of just like a placeholder. And in fact, what I might do instead of starting with column, I actually think I want to start with row. And that means that I want to show you how Flexbox stuff works in rows before I show you how it works in columns. So we're going to make a class of row in just a second, but really quickly, I want to also talk about the way that Flex works. So in general, if I were to look at this whole section, you'll notice that this section, if I collapse it, it is the parent of all those children inside of it that are nested inside. So all these divs are nested inside of this larger section. That means that each of these divs that are sitting sort of parallel to each other, side by side, as and they're referred to as siblings, right? They're like brothers and sisters, kind of, right? They're not like, you know, they're no aunts, uncles, none of that, right? But these are referred to as siblings because they're all in parallel structure to each other, meaning that they're not nested inside of each other and stuff like that, right? They're at the same kind of level of being children of this section parent, okay? And so as a result, what we can do is if we apply the Flexbox model to the parent, all right, this section, then section becomes the layout container for the flexible boxes. And so that all of its children then, each of these divs then become flexible targets. They become Flexbox targets, and they will by default sort of just fall in line and take that flexible layout. All right, so that means that the children of a Flex container, all right, the children of a Flex parent will ultimately take the flexible model as the flexible layout targets. Okay, so what we would want to do then is apply a class of row to section if we want to see it behave like the type of flex model that rows would have. And if you scroll down in the CSS, you'll see that I've got some spots where I made some comments. The first is just announcing, hey, these are the flex rules. And then I've got something that says vertical stacking columns. And then another one down here that says horizontal rows. And those are sort of the way that you might think of floats in a similar way. They're not the same as floats, so don't get me wrong. Flex and floats actually don't work very well together. So, but let's start with rows. And the reason I want to start with rows instead of columns is because row is the default behavior whenever you apply a flexible display flex to a container. So in this case, we're going to create a class called row. And you might say, well, why am I not just, instead of this, why am I not just saying section, right? You might say, why I could just call this section because up here it's the section is the container. Well, the thing is that if I want to be able to use modular design, then I need to be able to just simply apply a class to something because Flexbox will actually work on any element, right? It could be a section, it could be a div, it could be a list item, it could be a UL, it could be an anchor, it could be anything. You can apply display type of flex to any element and make that a flex container. So it's kind of nice if you want to do modular design to make something as a class, and then you can apply it multiple times to different things on the page if you want the same flex layout behaviors to apply to multiple different sections on the page. All right, so in this case, let's go ahead and make a new class called row. And the first thing you would do is you would say display, and then you'd say flex. Oops. Okay. And then as soon as you do that, you'll notice that something changed right up here. So far, what we're accustomed to is we're accustomed to seeing these divs, right? Because divs are natively block level elements. Well, a div would normally take up the entire width of its available space, right? Well, now it's not, because it is now, each of these divs happen to be the children of something that is a flexible container, right? Because we told this row, this class of row, to be display flex. And so that turns each of its children into flexible targets, all right? And it will make all of those children follow the flex model. Now, if you want to sort of better understand what's happening, we can go up here and we can say a border. Let's put a border on this, and let's give it 1 pixel, solid, and then black or something like that. All right, and then what you're going to see is that it shows you the entire row class, right, which is applied to a section. Section is a block level element. It's going to take up the entire thing, but because we just applied display flex, and the native behavior of just plain old display flex is to make it a row, it behaves like a block, right? And so it says, I'm going to take up the entire row, I'm going to take up the entire block, and I'm going to make my children sit side by side and inside of that. And they're only going to take up, the children will only take up as much space as is necessary. And so because we don't have a width set for any of these divs, then it will only take up as much space as is necessary. In this case, just enough space to display 0, 1 plus its padding, 0, 2 plus its padding, 0, 3 plus its padding, and so on, right? And then there's all this space left over. There's some different ways that you can adjust for that space at the end as well. You can also do something called justify content, all right? And then if we type that, and then there's some different values. In fact, before we do that, values up here in a comment, I'm just going to paste them so that you can see easily. But justify content will have some different values that you can do. You can either do flex start, and the nature, the default nature is going to be flex start. So this is what flex start looks like over here on the right, where it shows up as the beginning. If you were to choose flex end, let's just take that and let's paste that there. You can see that it justifies everything at the end. If you wanted to do center, as you can imagine, you can see how it would center. All right, and then if we did space between, it's pretty much just exactly the way that you would expect it to be. So it ends up being space between, but it basically pushes it flex start and flex end all the way to the ends, and then it puts space in between, and it justifies that. And then if you did space around, you'll see that it looks a little bit different in that it actually gives some space at the beginning and at the end. You'll see, right? As opposed to doing like space between, where it doesn't add it all the way around, okay? And when I say all the way around, I mean all the way around each element. And you'll notice that it's not doing any kind of margin collapsing, where like here you'll see that it's got this amount of space looks smaller, but really what it is it's the same amount of space around the 0, 1 and as it is around the 0, 2. It's just that in the center it's doubled up because it's 0, 1's right side margin plus the 0, 2's left side margin doubled up, right? So that's why sometimes, you know, space between might be a little bit better depending on what you're trying to do. Okay, now if you wanted to see how these things could you know, cascade differently, then let's take a look at that. So if we were to come down here and let's make these a specific width, so that they take up a certain amount of space. So in that case, you would want to say dot row for class div with a space, right? So you would, any instance of a div that is inside the row class, it will get this it'll get this style. So let's just first of all go ahead and tell it to have a width of, let's say 25% for right now. And you can see that it automatically wants to go ahead and take up that full amount of space, but it's not wrapping. And so that's the thing that we need to do, is we need to tell the row, the container, oops, we need to tell the row container that it needs to have a wrap, all right? And so to do that, let's come up here and we're going to say flex wrap, okay? And by the way, flex wrap, the default, by the way, is no wrap. All right, so that is the default, and that's what it is right now. And so it's just trying to shove everything in there because I'm not allowing it to wrap. But if we say wrap, then you see it lets each of these boxes fill up 25%, and then it wraps the content to fill the space, right? So, and it creates multiple different rows. Now, you can also do wrap reverse, just so you know, if you want to do it that way, and it'll turn everything backwards, right? So it starts from the top right and it goes 10, then it reads left, so it goes 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and so on. And this is how something you, like, you know, that you would read maybe for a different language or something like that. But we're just going to do wrap. All right, so, and then now it's working, and you could also play around and say, all right, well, now it's weird because they look like visual columns with, you know, solid blue all the way down and solid orange. If you wanted them to have a sort of parquet pattern, you could maybe do like 33%. And you'll notice that 33%, because I didn't do 0.333 and so on, there's that extra space, and so the justify content is doing space between, right? So you could also then come and just add all the extra decimal points so that it will actually close up the gap, all right? And then you've got this kind of parquet style that you can see, so you can see kind of what's going on a little bit better. All right, and so those are some basic ways that you can set something up so that these things will actually, you know, wrap and fill space the way that you expect them to, and so on. Now, this is, right now we've got like 10 different divs. If we had something that was, you know, less, right, then there's some other things that you could look at. Like, let's say you wanted something with 2 columns or 3 columns, and you wanted to apply that to each, you know, to each row, right, to each section that's going to have what we would otherwise call floating elements, right, but side-by-side elements. You know, you could always take this and do another example. Let's just take something where we've got, let's copy 3, and we'll come down here before the footer. I'll get rid of this in just a minute, but this is just for illustration purposes. And let's put the ending section tag. All right, and so now what we've got is we have another one here. Let's actually put a horizontal rule here in HR so that we can see something that's separating them. All right, and then if we wanted some other content in here besides just 0, 1, for instance, if we wanted lorem ipsum, I'll go over here to loremipsum.io. I'm going to copy some text. Let's copy some here, and I will paste that. Let's just do this. I will go in and I will paste that there. Let's just put this also inside of a paragraph tag. I think we should be able to do my, let's see, Command Shift A. We'll do a shortcut for a paragraph tag, and we'll wrap that around there. And so now we've got this text, and you'll notice right off the bat that the default behavior is for it to stretch to accommodate the longest amount of content. I just wanted to show you that really quickly so that you could see how, you know, if you didn't want like 10 different things that were wrapping and, you know, cascading, but really this is kind of the behavior that you wanted to just apply it to, you know, a single container that you knew you only wanted to have 3 visual looking columns on, even though it's a row, right? That it would expand to accommodate the longest amount of text. And so for instance, if I came over here and I did the full amount, let's just copy this lorem ipsum, and let's place that here. And this time I'll actually put a p tag. Let's do the ending p tag. I'll do that first, and then we'll paste that. And then you'll see now we've got something longer, but all of these expand vertically to actually fill the space. So I just wanted to show you how that would work. We don't actually need to keep that. It's really unimportant that we keep all that extra stuff that I just made. That was just for illustration purposes. So I can get rid of this. Let's see. In fact, let's just collapse the second section, not the first one with the 10 divs, but let's just get rid of this HR and that second section that I made. Let's just do that. Okay, and then we get back to this. I just wanted to explain and show you how that would actually stretch and accommodate the space for what we needed. So right now we've only really sort of explored the way that rows work, and that's by and large the most common way that you probably are going to use things. But let's go ahead and also look at how you can do columns. And so we can go ahead and end this video here, but we'll keep on working within the same Flexbox pin, Flexbox 3, basic rows and columns, okay? But let's go ahead and end the video here and then move on.